Hey guys, sorry this video took so long to upload. It's been a very long time. I just decided to do this little intro in the beginning of the video just because I actually started recording this segment a lot earlier than I'm recording this segment. So I'm gonna cut here and you'll see my little opening credit little thing, and then what'll happen is basically I'll go through all the stuff that I did to get the base to where it's at, and then I'll come back to this point in time, which is about 2 weeks after that, and then I'll continue on from there. So enjoy the episode. I do a lot of progress in this one. Not all of it I captured on film, but a lot of it I will go over with you guys, and hopefully you enjoy it, and there'll definitely be some cool sound demos at the end, which I'm about to record right now. So see you soon. Hello and welcome to another episode of Jacob's House of Rock. In today's episode, we will be completing the electronics in a little mod project of this Chickenbacker Rickenbacker 4003 base copy. If you've been paying attention to the series, you'd have seen all the progress. So at the moment, I've actually installed the genuine Rickenbacker pickups into this thing, but the wiring is still set up just like the Chinese wiring was originally. So it's more like a Les Paul sort of style wiring, and not the the setup or the values the same as in the actual Rickenbacker. So if you've kept up with my videos, I have a pretty in-depth video looking at the actual wiring diagrams of a Rickenbacker bass. I worked pretty hard to put those together for you guys, and for myself as well, to know what to follow. So in this episode, I'm gonna be changing out these electronics and installing the new stuff. So stick with me and we'll do a little sound demo to see if the electronics made any difference. So we'll do the DI first. one thing I should bring up is I'm thinking about changing out the bridge on this thing because I have some issues with, in particular, the low E. It feels a bit more hollow, a little less focused than the other strings, and I think a big part of that is that it's slightly off from the other pole pieces. So the two middle strings are pretty well above the pole pieces on this neck pickup, but the E string is just a little off to the side, and I don't know, I think that's the main reason it's getting that sound. And there you go. Obviously this still has some fret bars and all that stuff, which I will go into later, so most definitely you'll see another video in this series. But for the moment, let's get into some electronics. So I need to get this thing opened up again, and we'll take a look on the inside. So I'll cut right to that, so see you guys in a sec. Alright guys, so before we actually get into taking the bass apart and, you know, getting it all prepped for wiring and all that, I'm going to take you through all the components that I had to get to basically complete this project. So I'll just quickly show you a picture of the wiring diagram that I drew up of what I'm gonna be doing today. And this is basically a slightly modified version of an actual Rickenbacker wiring, but pretty much the same thing you'd find in an actual Rickenbacker, although I opted out of doing the Rico sound feature because one, I'm not going to use it probably at all, and because you need a whole bunch of other stuff to get that running, you know, 2 amps and a whole cable setup, which you know I could pull off, but it's probably something that I might look into in the future. And 2, it's just a bit of a hassle to get the pieces for that, because you need a special Switchcraft jack that's very specialized just for the purpose of making that particular mod to your bass. But yeah, it's not going to be a big difference. I'm just going to have it mono, so I'm going to use the jack from the bass, the existing one, and these are some of the additional bits that I'm going to be using. I'm actually going to be doing the vintage modern push-pull mod using this here. This is a push-pull switch potentiometer. Again, just check out my wiring diagrams. There's some info on this there. And basically all it is it's a switch here. If it focuses, this part is a switch. So when you pull it up, it does something there. I forgot the exact way that these little tags here interact, but I'll put an annotation on the screen of what kind of a switch this is, and I'll have a link in the description to a good website that explains these pretty well, so they're pretty easy to figure out. But the actual potentiometer and the switch are not electrically connected, so the potentiometer works either way, whether the switch is in the up or down position, and it works separately to the switch. It's just a pretty clever way of hiding this type of switch without the need to drill an additional hole and have the actual thing poking out, so you can just hide it under the potentiometer. So you could pull off this mod with a normal pot and a separate switch, but it's just kind of cool to have it all in one. So I opted to do this, and what that does is, God, if this camera would focus though, is it allows this capacitor to be taken in and out of the circuit. Now, this capacitor, if I can remember off the top of my head, is a 0.0047 microfarad capacitor, and this is what gives vintage Ricks their sort of slightly more thinner sound, more brighter sound. It takes away some of the bass from the circuit, and in recent years they've opted out of using these capacitors in their basses altogether. But then there was an uproar of people complaining, so because their basses had more of a modern, bassier, fuller sound at that point. So they opted to use a combo where you can basically switch between using this capacitor in the circuit or taking it away, and the way you do that is by using this switch. So it basically, all it does is in the bridge tone, it basically puts this capacitor in and out of the circuit. So that's what these two things do. So I was waiting for this to arrive, and that's why this project took a little longer than expected. Same with this capacitor. It's just, you know, a normal oh my god, if the camera would focus for 1 second. Sorry about that. This is just a normal film capacitor of some sort. Nothing special, because you don't, basically with capacitors and guitars, oh my god, it's not focusing at all, is it? Terribly sorry about that, guys. I'll just hold it back here where it is in focus. Basically, as long as you got one that works well, good quality, but doesn't have to be a specific brand or anything. I know a lot of people opt to swear by these, which are Sprague, or however you pronounce it, orange drop type capacitors, which I do have two here for the other two caps, the normal 0.047 rather than 0.0047 microfarad ones, which if you look at the diagram, you'll see where these go. Yeah, so these are just the reason I got these ones was it's like I have a local seller. By local, I mean they sell from Australia, from on eBay, and you can get these ones for, you know, a reasonable price. Like, you know, they probably cost like 10 cents to make, but you get them for like $2-3 each. I found, so I figured I may as well have the ones that I know are at least regarded as quality, but I couldn't find a decent price for one with this value. The cheapest would have been like around $10 or something along those lines, which is just insane because you really don't actually need a branded capacitor or anything. Same with some of the pots. These aren't like CTS or anything because it's a bit of a pain to find good knobs to fit on them. So I just I got some nice Chinese ones, I guess. I chose to get some of the larger size ones for no particular reason other than I liked the look of them. And they were about the same as the normal smaller ones, although the push-pull pots generally, I think they're all the smaller ones, at least at this price range. So, because Rickenbackers have a strange rating on their potentiometers, somewhere like 350k resistance, or something like that. But they don't really make those pots. That's not like a standard thing you'd find these days. You have to kind of go for combo of 500k pots and 250k pots. So you can, the way that I did this was that I made the tone pots, which this is one of them, if it would ever focus. There we go. And Audio Taper 500k. Both of them are Audio Taper 500k. I'm just using, the reason I only have 3 is because the ones stock already in the Chickenbacker are A500k pots. So I'm going to keep one of those, pair it up with this one, and they're going to be the tone pots. And the volume pots are going to be these 250k Audio Taper potentiometers. So this should serve our purposes quite well, and it'll round off to about 350k for each pickup as the resistance, and that'll get us because these values matter so much as the higher this value, the more brighter your instrument will sound. So if you see here, they usually use as standard, they use 250K potentiometers in single coil sort of guitars like Strats, because they tend to already have a very bright coiled pickups, so there's no need for, you know, an extra boost in highs, so they kind of try and mellow them out a bit with these pots. And the 500Ks are usually used in anything with a humbucker in it, or just something very dark sounding pickups, to pair up with those, to brighten them up a bit. In some cases, with very dark ones, you can even go up to twice this value, to 1 meg or something like that, but these are sort of the two standard values, and the most common that you'd find with pots. So they're the primary active sort of, well, not really active, but the main electrical components. I mean, of course, I got some just some basic wire, just a pretty thin gauge, like one of the thinnest that I got at my local electronics store down in Wollongabba, actually. They're pretty I find electronic stores extraordinarily overpriced, but at least they're a good way to get wire, because wire is never, or at least it never should be, expensive. So it just got two colors just to differentiate. Of course, I got some other wires, and I'll probably be recycling some wire from the actual existing electronics, but yeah. So push those to the side, and I'll show you some of the other bits that I'm using. So one thing I figured I might be worth trying out is some epoxy putty. So don't go for like your fancy schmancy art variety that people, you know, make custom figures and sculpt with and stuff, but you have some, you know, some whatchamacallit, industrial grade, sort of cheaper putty. And what I'm thinking about doing with this is, I noticed that in the cavity of the bass, they near the neck pickup, where, because the neck is a set-in neck rather than a through neck, there's this kind of gap, like there's the cavity, and then the neck kind of, the base, that neck fills up most of it, but there's this like gap, and the wood gets really thin around there, and it's a little concerning. Like, I figured it would affect the integrity and the sustain of the instrument, so I figured if I could plug it up with some of this, which this is basically like a two-part epoxy, but in a paste, and all you need to do is basically grab a chunk of this, squish it up, and then it turns into this like plasticine type thing, and within like 10 minutes it should turn into a rock hard sort of concrete type substance, and that should fill up some of that gap and hopefully retain some of the structural integrity of the bass. Try and help that. Not necessary, but just something I thought I'd do off the side, and a lot of people might look at this and be like, you're an idiot, why are you doing that? But you know, I just have a bunch of this stuff lying around, 'cause I do, and I haven't used it in a long time, and I figured it could be a good idea. And what else? So, of course, your standard soldering iron. Mine's a really shitty soldering iron. It's I need to give it a new tip and re-tin that tip, because I didn't do that this one, so I have to constantly scrape off the residue with some sort of metal implement before it actually wants to work. But once you get into the habit of, you know, using that technique, it works pretty well. So just a normal soldering iron, some sort of rosin or flux core solder, if it will focus. Nope. Okay. Thanks, camera. You're so helpful today. And I'm using some aluminium tape. This is just to insulate the cavities to prevent hum, because Rickenbacker high gain pickups are single coil pickups, which are prone to that 60 cycle hum that you get from just being around any other electronics, basically. And in this modern world, it helps to have some nice metal insulation just in the cavity of your guitar, connected to ground, to absorb some of that interference, and just basically ground it out of the circuit. And just some whatchamacallit, heat shrink tubing. So heat shrink tubing, some insulation tape, and that's it. I have some, those are the other little electrical bits, and then I just have some tools. This is a really cool little, I forget what it's called, but I got this from AliExpress. It's a little, it's used for when you have various sizes of these. This tool is, it has one end to screw them on because they have little teeth in these sort of ends that grip on, and one end to screw it off, but you use this to basically unscrew any size of these, so you don't have to constantly be switching spanners or whatnot. And this is also good for levering up anything pretty much, but it's good for tone pots. So this is just a really simple, good guitar tool to have. So I don't remember what it's called. Please comment below if you do. But yeah, just if you find one of these, they cost like, I don't know, $2-3 off AliExpress. Just a simple little piece of sheet metal. They're very effective, and I highly recommend these. So what else? Yeah, I've got a pair of helping hands. This is new, I've never used it, but I figured I may as well, since I do so much electronics and soldering, and I'm constantly dropping things and struggling with the wires to you know, stay together while I'm trying to solder them, especially with that dodgy soldering iron. So one of these is definitely going to be helpful. Yeah, so those are the components. Sorry that this little fragment of the video dragged on for so long. But let's take the bass apart. So I'm gonna, you've seen me unscrew and take off the strings, all the little components of the bass before, so I'm not gonna put you guys through that again, because I've done that many times. But I'm just gonna cut to once I've got the cavity of the bass open, and then we'll we'll add this into there. I'll show you guys that, and I will insulate the cavity, and then we'll get to the real stuff. Alright, so I've got the bass up here already. I've taken the slack off the strings till they're almost popping off, because I'm pretty sick of taking them off and on again. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this off without having to do that, because I think it might be doable. So can get the pickguard out safely. There we go. There's my previous wiring job. We got the, you know, pickups already in, so we're just gonna leave this part of the pickguard just as is. The switch, I might even leave the cables wired up just like they are here, and actually use desolder the cables going down further from this, and then reattach that where appropriate after I take a look at the diagram. But our first step is to clean and shield this area. So I'll just kind of plop something under the pickguard here so it doesn't scratch anything. It should be alright either way at the moment, but so we've already got the, you know, the pickups are already the correct pickups, they're installed, so we really don't need to do anything about taking this off, so that'll just stay. Look at my other videos if you're interested in how I changed this pickup, because it did require a little work to route this hole out a tiny bit. I didn't actually use a router, I just kind of poked at it with a whole bunch of stuff until it was just wide enough, because it was pretty close. Another thing we'll do is, I don't know if you can see here, I don't have much room to back the camera away, unfortunately. Oh, there we go. There's the jack, which I left pretty loose last time because I knew I was going to be going back at it. So we'll just take that off very quickly. So there's nothing wrong with this jack. I'm going to be reusing it for the final product, basically. if I was to do Rico sound, then there's a pretty thin section right here that you could probably drill another hole in there to get a second jack in there for the stereo, or it might be the mono. I forget how they have them arranged in Rico sound, but there we go, that's out. And the ground wire stuck to the pot here. So, actually before I get to this cavity, what I'll probably end up doing is I'll desolder the bridge pickup and the grounding wire, and then we'll cut right back. So, see you guys in a sec. So what I've done is I desoldered, like I said, I desoldered the bridge ground wire as well as the bridge pickup. So while I was at it, I decided to desolder most of the connections within the actual guitar itself, because I'm going to get rid of most of these components and replace them anyway. I left... I detached everything from this wire, basically, so it's not touching any of the pots or anything. I should have actually probably taken the jack off too, because it's going to be in a different spot by the time we're done, I bet. But yeah, so the neck pickup has also been detached from the pots, and we're going to be taking those out. I'm just going to be saving probably this one because it's the cleanest looking. I also left this wire on it because we're probably going to be able to reuse this one. So I'm probably going to be keeping this pot as the other tone pot, the neck tone pot, because the bridge one is going to be the push-pull, and these are the 500K audio taper pots. So these are the other three I'm not going to need, since I have that push-pull pot and the 250K for the volumes. So what I did with this, as you can see in another video, I did insulate it. So it's got the aluminium foil nicely done over here, and that's something we're about to do in the actual bass itself. So looking at the bass, it's very dusty on the inside, and it's something I probably should have done earlier, but I was rushing to get those videos out before, so I'm just gonna basically clean it up. It's just important to make sure that you get rid of some of that loose dust so the insulation actually sticks inside the bass. What's nice about Rickenbackers and this bass even is that a lot of the wires used are already insulated, which basically means that the ground wire is wrapped around the hot wire, like on these Rickenbacker pickups, and a lot of the wires stock in the Chickenbacker also are like that, which is pretty good. It's going to help quieten up any of that residual background noise and hum, which is lovely. Another thing I can show you if I angle the camera over is that gap under where the set and neck is. That's actually, I'll just skip forward a sec because I need to take the camera off the mount here, but bear with me. Alright guys, so here you can see this is the inside of the neck cavity, and you can see that the interior is kind of rough in here, so it's really hard to get rid of that dust because it's not really a glossy surface that you can clean well. It feels like the wood's still fairly exposed. But as you can see, there is that gap right here. So strange, this is a piece of the neck, the neck's wood, and it's, you know, there's the neck, it comes through, it goes into the body, and then it sticks out here. But then it's like, even though the pickups wouldn't be sitting that low, there's still this little gap here, and that worries me a bit for the bass's stability and stuff like that. And probably not a big deal. I mean, the thing feels solid, but that's why I'm gonna fill it up with this stuff. So bear with me while I find a place to put down the camera while I do this. I might as well show you the inside of the cavity while you're kind of floating around here. This white stuff, I'm not sure what it is. It's kind of part of the origin of the dust in here. It looks like some sort of primer, but it's almost powder-like, so it's a bit annoying. Here you see you have the hole for the jack. Goes in, it's a pretty deep hole. Goes all the way through there. And yeah, that's basically the body of the Chickenbacker. Got this stuff. I'll just show you what it is. It's like, it comes in a sort of cylinder shape. It might be a little dry now, but it's a two-part. It comes in two parts, but they're already sort of wrapped around each other. So you got that light green yellow one in the middle and this dark gray around it. And when you kind of like tear off a chunk, and then you're able to use just. You tear off a chunk, and then you're able to just knead it till it's uniform, and then within like 5 or 10 minutes it'll turn into a nice chemical reaction will occur, and it'll turn into like a concrete sort of type material, again epoxy based. So there we go. It's really sticky and it kind of smells fishy. It's hard to describe, but if we just tear off a good chunk, that should be enough to fix up that little gap. And I'm just going to knead it and put it in. So it's crumbling a little bit on the base, so I'll just do the kneading off camera, but I'll try and get it done as quick as I can so that it doesn't harden up before we actually are able to get it in there. You do have to knead it pretty well, because it's designed to kind of sit next to each other without reacting too much. But it turns like a light gray color. That's why I say it's very much like concrete. And like that. So if I could be bothered, I'd probably fix that little gap up with wood initially, but this just seems like a little experiment that would be a little easier for me, at least at the moment. And you could probably always find some way to get rid of this stuff if you really needed to get rid of it. It's fairly solid. It could even cure underwater, from what I understand, but you can machine it away. Okay, so I'll try and do this and film at the same time. Might not be smartest idea, but that's not what this channel is for, is it? I'm kidding. I try and get as good a content or as intelligent a content as I can for you guys, but can't always be the case. So we're just gonna push it down into there. And I'll probably just skip ahead to when this is done now, so that we can actually get to insulating this thing and get to the real interesting bits, which will be the wiring. Alright, so that epoxy putty has pretty much set. It's I added a little extra on the sides. It's pretty much rock solid now. So again, this step is completely optional. Probably won't affect anything, but I figured that looked a little dodgy, so may as well try fix it up. And I got a good start on my shielding job here. So basically I'm just going through layering this aluminium foil tape. And a good little trick, which I did bring up in my other video doing this, is when you have the tape, because the glue side of it is non-conductive, or at least not as conductive as the other side. To make sure you have good conductivity, you take a corner or something, or any part really, and you bend it upside down onto itself. So something like that. So then you have the top facing down when you place it on top of your another bit that you've already layered. So I've just been going through and doing that, trying to do as long pieces as I can, but you know, it's a little bit restrictive in some areas, so you gotta settle for shorter bits. Well, something like that. And try and fill it up as best as you can. Okay, so I finished up with insulating the cavity on the Rickenbacker base. Well, the Chickenbacker base. I ran out of foil, as you can see, so I didn't quite do it as fully as I would have liked to, but it should be alright for, you know, for what it is. It shouldn't be too big a deal, and when I get some more, I can always go back in there and touch it up. But for the moment, let's get to the Pickguard. So I'll probably skip through most of this stuff and just yeah, just talk about it at the end. But basically what I'm up to now is just taking off the pots and arranging everything. And probably once I've got that done, I will I'll show you guys basically how I'm gonna set everything up. So I'll start by, you know, removing these, and we'll be, you know, using this tool again, the one I mentioned before. So I'll just demonstrate that for you guys. So it's got teeth on one side of this V here. It's blurry, but you can see it. So it's got teeth on one side, and if I try and unscrew it, this way, the teeth don't really do anything. But if you flip it over, it's got the teeth on this side now, and now you can actually unscrew, and that does it really easily, and you can do that on pretty much any size nut. So very useful tool. I used it to lever off the knobs earlier. So I'm just gonna get rid of all the knobs. I'm gonna leave the switch, and I'm gonna solder this off, and yeah, and then once I've looked over the diagram and all that, and I know what I'm doing, I'll give you guys a little update. Alright guys, so it has been like 2 weeks since I recorded that last segment there, so I'm sorry this episode took so long to, you know, to get to completion, but the editing process and the filming process was a bit complicated, and I had some issues when I was setting up the base. I ended up snapping a string, so I had to order in some new strings. Then I had some more issues with the soldering that I did, so I had to go back in, fix that up again. In the meantime, I fixed up the bridge, which I will go over in a separate little video, which I'll have uploaded really soon after this one. But for the moment, let me go over what I actually did. So, in terms of the wiring, so this thing is now fully wired and fully done up like a real, genuine Rickenbacker bass, electrically at least. So basically, the wiring diagrams I gave you guys are almost completely accurate. The one little issue that I would have changed differently on the schematics that I drew up for you guys, not schematics, just wiring diagrams, but the things that I drew up for you guys, is be mindful that I may have drawn the switch the wrong way around, meaning that basically all you have to do is swap around. Either you have enough wire on the switch to physically flip it around, or you reverse the pickups, the corresponding wires from each pickup go to the opposite side of the switch. It's a minor thing, and it still sounds exactly the same and works almost exactly the same. It's just that the positioning of the switch would be a tiny bit different. Other than that, everything works. It sounds pretty good. For me, it's still, the output is a little bit low, but the main reason for that is because the string height is still a tiny bit high, and I can't really raise these pickups any higher, unfortunately. They're at their maximum, and there's still, you know, a good centimeter and a half, or somewhere under that, somewhere between a centimeter and a half above the pickups, which is a little bit too high, I think. But yeah, so far everything's, all the electronics are done. I could have shielded a little more, but I ran out of tape at the time, and I don't think I'm not really feeling like going back in and adding more of that, because it's not too noisy or anything. So yeah, that's where I'm up to with this one. Some other issues, which at the beginning I said that this might be my last video on it, and I might do one more on changing out the bridge. That still might happen. At the moment I have no plans to, because it's working all right, and I'll go over that in my next video, of course. So there'll be 2 videos coming up at least about this bass, so in the series. So one will be just showing you what I did to the bridge here to get the string spacing right, and another will be going over the fret work, because I can't really lower the strings too much because the frets aren't perfectly done on this thing, so it needs some fret work. It gets really buzzy if you get the strings to a comfortable playing height, so I find that along with having changed the string spacing, so the strings aren't as close to the edge of the neck, at least the outer strings, so it's a little more fiddly. Plus you have to bend the strings down quite a bit to push them towards the frets to actually fret the notes. So it's not the most ergonomic feeling bass. Like if you have this bass and then you grab a jazz bass, it's like night and day. But again, this it's just kind of the price of getting these components to work in this bass, and compared to the price of an actual Rickenbacker bass, I think it's a price I'm willing to pay. So yeah, so so that's my progress on this bass. It's gone from being just a cheap imitation copy to something that functions very much like the real thing, with a few little issues still yet to be fixed up. But when I'm able to get these strings a little bit lower and get the action to a comfortable playing distance, then this thing will really shine, I bet. So alright guys, so now I'm just gonna, for the rest of the video, I'm just gonna give you guys a good demo of what this bass sounds like. So remember, this is a Chinese Copy Rickenbacker bass, a counterfeit bass, but fitted with real Rickenbacker pickups and modified electronics to match those of a real, genuine Rickenbacker, with a push-pull pot that changes the voicing of the bridge pickup from vintage to modern, if you so choose. They're doing this on their modern releases now, but originally that wasn't a feature. Anyway, here we go. Now I'm going to give you a demo of how the modern sounds. So I'm going to, basically all you got to do is you push this up, it clicks into place, no problem, and this is the sound you get. So this is again just the bridge pickup. A lot thicker tone. This is the vintage again. Pickups together with back on vintage. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. I've had a lot of fun making this series for you, and I hope to see you at my next episode of this series, where we'll be taking a look at how I adjusted the string spacing and fixed up the bridge. So do stay tuned for that, and keep on rocking, people. Peace out.